Because he'll get painted grass.
Before these two CMU members received their shooting training, everybody was given a safety brief. You'll hear Nathan give a more detailed brief, but the bare bones were given by a younger member.
What do you mean? Well, since we're all kids, hopefully we all got a safety briefing by whoever on your 4 rules of firearm safety. So rule number 1 is always keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. It's a very important one. Number 2 is always keep your gun pointed in a safe direction. Number 3 is know your target and beyond. And number 4 is treat every gun as if we're loaded. So every single accident that's ever happened with a gun, besides a mechanical failure, haven't happened because someone didn't follow one of those 4 rules. So very important.
No load of firearms anywhere other than the instructors. You won't load your firearm until you're on the firing line after you've been instructed to do so. Also, when you're on the firing line, do not break the 180 rule. 180 rule is, so that's downrange, this is 180. Don't let your barrel of your firearm go across the 180. Essentially that's saying don't point it at the audience or
the instructor.
Yeah, especially me. So that's one of the major ones. When we get into doing movement drills, there are some other safety rules that happen with that, and that's when we start doing intermediate pistol and intermediate rifle. So, but that's good enough for basic.
Here we see one of the range instructors making a small adjustment to the screws on the rail. A couple of these screws were loose, and for uniformity, he wanted to make sure that everything was tightened down. Up next is Nick's brief on using a sling as a support for firing the weapon. Shooting was done without resting the gun on a solid surface, but holding it, because this produces the greatest amount of control over the weapon.
Those weren't very tight at all. They were designed for going way back to like Kentucky rifles. They're super long, unbalanced. They were using slings as a form of support and should still be used so that in that manner. And so how you do this with an AR is you take your arm and you want to rest it around the cuff of your arm. And if you can get that wrapped around and then pull that back into your shoulder, you're going to get more support. You're building a triangulation instead of just trying to hold something out in front of you. And you're going to have faster follow-up shots and more consistent placement. My shoulder. You can't do that with a bungee. It's just going to give, right? So this is why when we cover the class we use 2-point slings. 3-point slings are still essentially a 2-point. They just have like a single point style loop in them, which aren't going to be really any more effective. And then single points, you don't really have any method of support out of that. It's just meant to be a holster. The other key drawback about a single point, so in a case like this, if I approach that fence and I want to go over that fence and I have a single point, I don't have anything to control my muzzle with. Yeah. When I go over that, I could get racked in the balls. I'd rather not.
As the militiamen were setting up their targets, I went to go talk to one of the range instructors.
Your experience? You've trained with military, you said?
Well, collaborated with military. I am not prior military or law enforcement. I've just worked with them in a number of capacities, and I've shot competition and just a lot of experience in a multitude of disciplines in regards to firearms, and so they appointed me as the senior firearms instructor.
And you're part of Geist Dynamics.
Nathan and I are co-owners of Geist Dynamics, and we started the company because of the outside demand beyond the CMU, and then it's also brought some other opportunities to us as well, having a federal firearms license and such. Here's our business license, our federal firearms license. We're a 07 class, which is for manufacturers, which allows us to manufacture firearms and ammunition as well as deal firearms and ammunition.
Before you get much deeper into this video, one thing that you should notice is that this is not a run and gun type training. The purpose of today is to re-qualify 2 members on shooting one of the 5 pillars of CMU education. Others include land navigation and communication. CMU is not a gun club. Guns are in fact only about 1/5 of what the CMU tries to impart on its members. A couple of members at the end of the session shoot for fun, but all of these shots were well aimed and targeted. This was not kind of shooting guns off into the air. It was very concerted and used solely for education and training. The initial calibration of the iron sights took a good bit of time. Although those last 4 shots seem uneven, remember that there are 2 shooters calibrating their sights, both of which are firing evenly spaced, timed out shots. The design of this was to make sure their sights were well calibrated for the qualifying shots later that day.
We're going to do a 3-round shot group on the target that we designated to you. Yeah, I'd say 2 clicks on your rear side.
To the right.
Yeah, because all of your shots are on the left side.
Okay.
Well, the majority, almost all of your sights are on the left side.
After working out some kinks in his iron sights, Dan began close-range testing again. Although I said earlier that the CMU doesn't test resting their rifle against a surface, this was only done to calibrate before the actual qualification. By the end of the day, both of these men were declared qualified based on hitting a target at 3 increasingly difficult ranges.
Make sure when you bend over to bring that down, make sure your gun's always pointed that way, right?
Can't see anything. You're right there, John. I really don't. Yeah, you're. I wouldn't touch it. Honestly, I think all 3 of those are in the black. A little straight because the one that's just off of the black is from the previous. Yes.
Before we calibrate the iron sights, I wanted to talk to Dan, one of the men qualifying today. His experience and survival skills is what the men in the Citizens Militia call the gift that keeps on giving.
Hi, I'm Dan Lundwall with the Citizens Militia of Utah, and I arrived at CMU to share some of my experiences that I have. I'm also the Salt Lake County Emergency Coordinator for Salt Lake County, and I deal a lot with emergency preparedness in general. So I was involved with emergency preparedness really all my life. I went through 2 7.4, one 7.4 and one 7.5 earthquake down in South America, and that scared the crapola out of me. It is a life-changing event, and living here in Utah, especially in Salt Lake County, I know what's coming. Yeah. So the Wasatch Fault runs along actually it's a number of fault lines in from Nephi all the way up towards Bear Lake, and it actually crosses over south of the Great Salt Lake, which is the result of the Magna earthquake. We had a 5.7 earthquake a few years ago, and that's peanuts compared to the one that's happening. again, there are actually 100 of fault lines, and the whole thing is considered the Wasatch Fault. And every 350 years, approximately 300 to 400 years, the big one hits. And we know that because we have a geology record that keeps track. For the last 10,000 years, every 300 to 400 years, a 7-point X earthquake hit, and we're at 350 years since the last one. So it's really not a matter of if, but when. People ask me, why do you prepare? And I tell them, well, the one very simple thing that I believe in. I would rather prepare, and if the event doesn't happen, then I'm no worse off. I can afford to be wrong. People who do not prepare cannot afford to be wrong. Okay, the earthquakes were in Chile, 1980-81, and when the first one hit, which was a 7.5, I was probably 20 miles from the epicenter, and even that 20 miles was, if you can imagine yourself standing on the side of train tracks and a freight train goes by and you move your head so you're 6 inches away from the train going by, that is what it sounded like. It was deafening. I fell down right where I stood. People are not going to be able to run to a safe place. Again, it's the things that are falling on you that kill you, not the earthquake itself. It's the cause of the earthquake. And it is some scary business when it hits.
Grouping, you get 500 yards. I imagine it's more like a mortar at that point. Because you're aiming like up here, trying to get it to go 500. So is that just mostly a bench one? No, I bought it. Me and my buddy were going to go first.
And that's really the main reason why I do what I do with emergency preparedness. As far as Citizens Militia of Utah, I teach a number of classes with regards to that. There is an emergency preparedness pillar of education that CMU teaches, and just last week I taught water purification. I teach a 5-stage process to make sure the water that you drink post disaster will be safe to drink. And one of the things that I try to make sure people understand is the majority of deaths and injury doesn't actually happen during the earthquake. It happens after the disaster. The number one killer of humankind is dysentery, which is drinking bad water. And so if you do not have a means for that, then you're going to be in a heap of trouble. And that's just one aspect of the things that I teach. I also teach navigation, orienteering with a compass and map. There may be a time when GPSs may not work, or you're out in the field and your GPS runs out of battery. So now what do you do? So we get down to the basics here at CMU, and we teach how to navigate using astronomy, how to use the navigation with the compass. It's not as straightforward as you might believe. We have this little Mother Nature has played a trick on us here in most places of the world, and that is magnetic declination. Our compass does not point directly to the North Pole. It points to the magnetic North Pole, and here in where I'm standing, it's 11 degrees off. So it's not a big deal if I'm only using my compass to travel 100 yards, but if I'm using it to travel 30 miles, I'll be off course if I just follow my compass a good couple, 3 miles. So it makes a difference on understanding how compasses work. So that's one of the things that we teach.
The next few minutes show these two members meeting their qualifications at the short, medium, and long distance on an AR platform rifle. The man shooting nearest to me actually got supposedly a perfect score, getting every round in the black, even on the farthest target. Their shooting consisted of several rounds while prone, kneeling, and standing.
So John, you're sighting in your rifle. It's not about how fast you want as slow and precise a shots as you can, because this is going to affect your.
Also, I should point out that during the kneeling position, they do support their rifle up against the wood, but this is not relying entirely on the support. They did place some pretty heavy emphasis on not relying on support like this, but using your own body to control the rifle.
Okay.
All right, are you ready? Go ahead and lock and load.
Ready.
All right, when you hear the beeper, begin.
For a short bit of explanation on some of what they were seeing in terms of bullet drop, one of the range instructors was explaining how the bullet tends to actually go a little bit up before coming back down, and once it starts going down, the drop gets very rapid.
So we teach the class around the AR-15 platform foremostly, as well as the 5.56 or 223 cartridge. And we teach on, the basic class is taught on iron sights only, and they are less prone to failure than optical systems, and should at least be kept on your rifle as a backup. But this is also, it's a basic fundamental, so it's why we incorporated it and mandated it into the basic class. When we get into the intermediate and advanced classes, then we'll work more in depth with optical systems. But when we teach this class, we base it on the 36-yard zero, which also with your trajectory intercepts your line of sight again at 200 yards. So zeroing at 36, so 36 yards is where your zero is. 100 and well, that's going to be your apex, which is about 130, 140 yards. That'll be the apex of your trajectory, the highest you'll be, which is still considered a solid combat yet. As we get closer to 200, we'll come back to where you zeroed at, and then as you move out, 300, 350, 400 would be, that's 400 you'd be down here off the target. So by understanding what your bullet is doing in flight as far as its trajectory goes, you're going to want to hold for this, or a on-the-fly compensation. So if your target's at 140 yards and you know you're going to hit high, about 4 inches high, hold 4 inches low as center mass, and you'll still be center mass impacts. This is not accurate, it's just a visual representation. So this would be 36 yards. And that's, we have what's called mechanical offset. So your sights sit like 1.5 inches, 1 3/4 inches above your bore axis, the center of your bore. Your trajectory intercepts your side axis at at 36 yards. That's how we'll set this up today. From 36 yards to 200 yards, you're going to be over your side axis. So you're going to be hitting high. When you get out to 200, you'll intercept again, you're back to a 0, and then beyond 200, you're continually dropping.
I'll still take HK. Is it a 416? Is it a 416? HK? No, 556. Oh.
So the 416 is the destination the military's get used. The MR 556 is $600 up there. Yeah.
The main objective of the day was to certify the 2 Citizens Militia of Utah members in their annual training, but with that taken care of, some of the members decided to take out their own rifles and just take a few practice shots, and the last few minutes of this video are a few other people showed up with their own rifles, and there was even some pretty heavy weaponry there by the time we left, and we were all kind of watching in awe. It was pretty fun to see.
I feel like my times one's even like zoomed out. Like I look through that versus my scope, it seems even smaller.
How stable do you feel when you're shooting like that?
Pretty stable. But even with, I guess not here, but this is a 223.
Cool.
It's a weird.
What did I do?
Print this
My
receiver.
rifle, mixed rifles ran in.
I'm expecting it like 223. The ones, yeah, that's your version is put together a lot better than mine. I got mine from my grandfather.
Oh, yours is the Gen 1.
Yeah.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
They actually made quite a bit of improvements on the Gen 2.
Really?
So,
I bet.
so Henry, was yours made by Henry?
Yeah.
Okay, it was one of the original Henrys. I gotcha. Yeah. The plan I really had was
I probably should have kept it just because of the type of gun it was and the age of it. But
That's odd.
yeah, it takes one screw to take the entire thing apart. Right there. And I've actually